Can you please call the roll?
Mrs. Gator? Here. Mrs. Newman? Here. Mr. Freeman?
Present.
Mr. Roberts?
Here.
Ms. Mitchell?
Present. All members are present and accounted for. I do want to welcome our guests to this evening's meeting. It's nice to see people in the audience again. It's been a while. So welcome to our meeting. If we can stand right now for item 1.2, the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You may be seated. All right, if we can have a motion on the floor from item 1.3.
Madam Chair, I move that we accept item 1.3 of the agenda.
Thank you. May I have a second? It has been moved and seconded. Team, is there any discussion about tonight's agenda before we take the vote?
I do want to say that there will be one executive session for two separate real estate items.
All right, anything else? Dr. Wright, can you please call the vote?
Mr. Freeman?
Yes.
Mrs. Gator? Yes. Mrs. Newman? Yes. Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Ms. Mitchell?
Yes, motion passes 5-0. Next on our agenda, we need to approve minutes, and we need a motion to approve the minutes for October 6, 2021, our work session meeting, and October 11th, 2021, our special meeting.
Madam Chair, I move that we accept item 1.4 approval of your minutes for the dates of October 6th and October 11th, 2021.
Thank you. May I have a second? Thank you, ma'am. Board, before we go to vote, is there any discussion?
No, ma'am.
Dr. Rock, can you please call the roll?
Mrs. Gator? Mrs. Newman? Yes. Mr. Freeman?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Ms. Mitchell?
Yes, motion passes 5-0. Next on our agenda is public participation, and we don't have any audience members who have handed in cards. Have we put our cards out there yet?
Yeah, cards are.
Okay, they are there. So we haven't had anybody hand a card in for tonight. And are we getting any more via online at all?
No, we haven't received it.
Okay. All right. Well, then we're going to move on to item 1.6, and I'll let you introduce.
Yes, at this time, I'd like to bring up Mr. Shannon Thornton, our Director of Data and Scholar Intervention. Ms. Thornton will start to do quarterly updates on just where our data is. Today, what she'll do is provide us just an overview of where we started and where we are today. Ms. Thornton has came in and worked very, very hard to not only capture our data, but to help our schools provide intervention. The job was kind of morphed into ensuring that every kid received intervention in the district who needed it, who fell behind. And I can say today that Ms. Thornton has been relentless in attending meetings, pushing the envelope to ensure that everybody's on board. She'll share some of her work that she's done, but she's been relentless to ensure that every student is receiving the intervention they need, especially at our elementary school. Her presence is one that's of strength, and one of determination, and she's one who definitely shares our one team, one vision, one goal, and the passion to understand how important this is. So in her presentation, I'm pretty sure you'll see and feel it for her now. So Ms. Thornton, it's on you.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Jolly. It's really been a pleasure to serve the city of Warrensville Heights over these last 4 months. So I'm excited to bring to you what we have been able to do so far with our interventions. The first thing is I created our own mission because the department, like Mr. Jolly said, was created out of another position and out of the need to address the unfinished learning that we knew students were going to come in with. So I wanted to be very mindful of that. So I kind of merged what my mission was with the mission of the district, which is to ensure that all scholars in Warrensville Heights City School District receive the individualized support they need to be confident, empowered, and successful. And the main thing there is all students. So Mr. Njali and I really pushed not just our students who fell behind, but also those students who were at or above grade level, and making sure they got what they needed to continue to grow and be pushed and accelerated.
Next slide, Joe.
I can just say next.
Yeah, just
Will that work? All right. Next slide. And there it is here.
slide. She just did that.
Yeah. Our district goal is to raise the proficiency or improve it by 7% each year through 2026 as measured by state and district adopted assessments. And my department plans on supporting that through the targeted and intentional interventions. Go to the next one. When we were planning these interventions, we wanted to use data to inform them. So one of the, you can go to the next slide. One of the first things we looked at before I even came to the district was the OST scores. You can see in the light blue, that's our 2021 data, and in our dark blue, the 2019 data. And you can see the huge difference, especially in our elementary schools. So a lot of our resources were allocated to making sure that our youngest scholars receive the most support in human capital and in materials. You can go to the next slide. The next thing we used to inform our decision was our universal screeners. Unlike a lot of districts, we provided universal screeners from grades K through 12 in reading and in math, and in 6 through 12 in social studies and science as well. It's a lot of data, but if you go down to the bottom, you'll see the district average. 49% of our students were identified as needing some type of intensive intervention. 22 needed strategic intervention. And then, like I mentioned before, that dark blue, it's kind of hard to see, but 18% were near or at, and 17% were at or above. So you can just see the wide spread of needs in our district based on a universal screener. You can go to the next slide. And the most recent data that we have is our benchmark data, and benchmark data cover what is being taught in the classrooms based on our scope and sequence. Looking at that data, you can see that our students did not do well at all at mastering those assessed topics. And that comes from the unfinished learning, as you can see, but then also more support at the tier 1 level and the classroom level at differentiation. Most of our kids fell far below basic in math and far below basic in reading, which is very concerning. And we'll talk about what we're doing to address that. You can go to the next slide. So what we're doing, and Mr. Jolly talked about progress monitoring, is I really spent a lot of time over the first 4 months in the elementary school, K through 5. It's our biggest building with almost 900 scholars. And we have been providing 1 hour of additional reading instruction every day, which they call no new instruction. Starting the week of November 8th, we used a program called Acadian's Online Learning to measure the progress. And you can see on the chart as an example, on the second graph, this particular scholar, that's where she scored that big dot at the beginning of the year. And then that small dot is where she scored when we gave the benchmark the week of November 8th. And you can see it went down. And I picked that one, for example, because most of our students did go up. We haven't finished analyzing it. But the reason for the progress monitoring is to look at those students who the interventions are working, to continue it, and the interventions that are not working, to analyze that data as well. We also have teachers all of our teachers at the K-8 level use our program Branch and Minds to track the minutes that they provide intervention. So for this particular scholar, we will look at attendance, has her group leader, the teacher, we call her intervention support teachers, have they been pulled to sub, or if she's here every day, she's getting the instruction, then what else can we do to help the scholar get that red means that she's making well below typical progress, into the yellow or the green, which is above typical progress or near typical progress. You can go ahead to the next slide. So we'll go over each intervention plan by building. Each building has its own plan. I kind of hit on the elementary school, but I'll go over it briefly. You can go ahead to the next slide. We have 2 buildings in one, as you know. So kindergarten and first grade, not counting the preschool, they have 284 students. 100% of the students in kindergarten and first grade have an intervention plan in reading. They receive 1 hour of what's called no new instruction every day, where they receive intensive intervention where they address unfinished learning. All the students are put into groups, and those groups were separated based on data. So they work with the same person every single day on specific skills using materials that are appropriate for their needs. So that ends up being, if the child is here every day and no one is pulled, about 300 weekly planned intervention minutes in addition to the regular reading program that they get. You can go ahead to the next slide. Second through fifth grade has 552 students. 100% of those students too have an intervention plan in reading. And in addition to their 90 to 120 minutes of uninterrupted ELA instruction, grades 2 through 4 receive 60 minutes of no new instruction, just like kindergarten and fifth grade, but kindergarten and first grade, but fifth grade is a little different because of their schedule. They are only able to get in an hour every week instead of the 60 minutes every day, like grades 2 through 4. So I did want to note that. But still, most of the elementary school grades, kindergarten through fourth grade, are getting 300 additional minutes of intervention every week. We can go ahead to the next slide. Some highlights from the elementary school. We can go to the next one. I talked about how all scholars in grades K-5 have been placed in small intervention or enrichment groups based on universal screening data for reading. Scholars receive an additional 300 minutes of reading instruction weekly. There are over 140 groups that meet daily to receive targeted, intentional instruction with their classroom teacher or an intervention support teacher. All teachers have been trained to progress monitor using Acadian's online learning and will receive training on how to analyze and interpret the data to make instructional decisions regarding intervention grouping. Teachers track the minutes that each of their students receive intervention weekly in our MTSS. It stands for multi-tiered support system, where we house all the data, behavioral and academic and branching minds. Scholars who are below grade level in reading are assessed every other week, beginning the week prior, November 8th, to monitor the effectiveness of the intervention, and students at or above grade level are assessed monthly to assess the effectiveness of the intervention. And then the last highlight is we use a variety of appropriate instructional material to meet the needs of each group. We gave a survey because we are going on break, and then we have 3 weeks when we get back. So we are looking at what worked with the data, what didn't work, collecting that data. Most of our teachers believe the materials are developmentally appropriate. 80% of teachers believe scholars in their groups are grouped appropriately, and 88% of teachers understand the importance of the intervention fidelity monitoring, the importance of tracking those minutes down to the minute of how many minutes a student receives every week. At the middle school, it's a little different. The principals did decide how they want their intervention to work. So our Principal Harris, was very creative in the fact that she wanted the lowest of her scholars to receive intervention every day. And she also wanted to separate it by gender to see if that had any impact on the social and emotional needs of the scholars. But with that being said, only 15% of the scholars in the middle school are receiving intervention. So I'm in talks with Ms. Harris to see how we can increase that because that need is there as well. But the purpose of her reading intervention course is to support the lowest achieving math students with their unfinished learning. It's just a math and reading, and help them understand grade level standards and be more successful with learning within the mathematics and language arts classroom setting. They meet once a day for 45 minutes, so those lowest scholars are getting 225 weekly planned intervention minutes a week. Some highlights from the middle school. Both intervention classes, we have 3 teachers who are providing this intervention, classroom teachers, certified teachers. They use intervention programs that are proven, research-based, Reading 180 for the reading programs, and Alex for the reading intervention class, and Alex for the math intervention class. Both programs create personalized learning pathways, so students are, the program automatically, through diagnostic testing, identifies what gaps students have, and it provides them with lessons at a steady pace to fill those gaps in assessments along the way. And the programs allow teachers and administrators to be able to track and monitor that data to make sure the program is being implemented with fidelity and see how students are growing in real time. Go to the next slide. And not only do they use the programs, we do make sure that they are, that last slide was just making sure that they also get face-to-face instruction and small group instruction as well. So during that 45 minutes, they are completing a rotation where they meet with the small group, the teacher teaches the lesson, and then they use Alex to finish that unfinished learning. So it's a mix of all three things. Lastly, the high school. In high school, I put in parentheses 9th and 10th grade. That's where we're targeted. We have exactly 300 students, 9th and 10th grade. Our 9th grade class is very big with about 170 scholars. 100% of 9th and 10th graders have an intervention plan. The 9th graders all have math intervention, and the 10th graders all have reading intervention to prepare for the state test that they have to pass. So that course is twofold. It's to support them in finishing their unfinished learning, and then also help them understand the grade level standards to pass the end of course exam so they can graduate. Because of the AB schedule, they can have this class 2 days a week. They can have it 3 days a week. So it's somewhere between 180 and 270 additional minutes every single day. Some highlights from the intervention program at the high school. At the high school, the program that they use is Delta Math. Delta Math is used to review, assess, and spiral standards in math intervention. Read 180 is the program that's used to create personalized learning pathways that support them in completing their unfinished learning. And just like the middle school, scholars still meet daily with the teacher in small groups to receive targeted instruction on specific skills. In addition, teachers follow an intervention scope and sequence to review priority standards that are often tested on state exams, and those were created by the Department of Curriculum and Instruction. So next steps, like Mr. Jolly said, I have put in with the Curriculum and Instruction Department and really the whole district working together. We've put in a lot of work with intervention. Our next step for the second semester is looking at the quote is progress means getting near to the place you want to be. And if you have taken a wrong turn, then to go forward does not get you any nearer. So really using our progress monitoring tools, really using our universal screeners that are coming back up again in December and January to see if this plan looks good, it sounds good on paper, it looks good in our observations, but is it really pushing us towards our goal? And if it's not, reevaluating it and making those changes. But some things we do have in place, you can go ahead to the next slide, is one big thing that I really want to push is increasing communications with parents about their child's assessment data, interventions, and progress monitoring scores. That's something we haven't done historically, and I really want to make sure that this go around that parents know where their students are. A lot of our teachers are saying that they feel like they're giving 100%, but families and parents don't really meet them there, or students. But part of my push has been, have we communicated the need? Have we communicated that their child is 2 or 3 grade levels below and all the stuff we're doing, and what can they do to support us? So a lot of that this semester will be making sure we increase the communication with parents. And the other one is district-wide, is to make sure that the assessment data and progress monitoring is visible with some kind of scoreboard that's easily attainable to all. So are you putting in the minutes? How many minutes are counting? What's the progress data saying? And making sure that that's public and well known, not to get you, as they like to say, they always think somebody's out to get them, but really to create a culture of celebration, because hopefully kids are growing and that will increase that motivation to continue to provide these interventions. You can go to the next slide. Next steps with the intervention plan at the elementary school is to develop a consistent routine of analyzing progress monitoring data, assessments, to make instructional grouping decisions that are flexible based on the needs of the child. and create a plan to address math unfinished learning at the upper elementary school. Just to elaborate on that a little bit, progress monitoring, like we said, we just started it. So we want to run through it enough times. You need at least 3 probes to see if it's effective. So 3 different progress monitoring steps. So that's going to take a while. But then we're finding through talking with the teachers that some kids are growing way faster than other kids. And that could be because they never had a deficiency. They just didn't get learning because of the pandemic. But now that they got it, they're catching up. So they want to be able to, how can we move these groups around quicker and then get them what they need and make it flexible, because it took a whole lot of work from us to develop these groups. So how can we change them around and make sure every child is getting what they need? As you can see, I said a lot about reading. Our district's literacy priority is the reason we started with reading, and reading is the building block to everything else. But we do want to address math. So really thinking of ways to build that into it without overwhelming the teachers or the scholars with something else brand new. So, but we know the need is there. So we're just trying to figure out how to get that with what we have and the constraints we have with people and time and everything else. For the middle school, I think I touched a little bit on this. Our next steps is to provide professional development that focus on providing strategic and intentional interventions for teachers, providing math and reading instruction. Just from observations and talking with teachers and leaders in the buildings, this is something that we can use to build internal capacity with our teachers. They are experiencing something they never had experienced before with such wide gaps. And so the things that they used to do aren't working, or they're not seeing the results because they're teaching the same lessons the same way. So really building their toolbox about how to differentiate and reach the needs of all kids in the class. In a middle school, developing a cycle to administer progress monitoring assessments to scholars in the designated intervention classes. They've been doing it themselves, but there's really not a concrete plan per se, like in elementary school. So really developing that calendar and that cycle for second semester. And then, like I mentioned before, developing a school-wide plan to address unfinished learning in reading and math. So it's just not those bottom 15%, but as you can see, everybody in the building needs some support too. And the high school is very similar to the middle school. Those teachers there, even more so, are very used to a kind of sit and get instruction. So really helping them, like you naturally see a kindergarten teacher have small groups. That same model in high school is not very heard of. So definitely building their toolbox through PD conferences and things like that, so they become more comfortable with how to do it. We're at the point now they know they need to do it, but it's really about the how. Developing the same cycle to administer the progress monitoring and finding the right tool to really assess what students are learning. And then to intentionally integrate test-taking strategies, exposure to and practice with test content and release questions, and explicit content vocabulary instructions to prepare scholars for success on their ELCs. Unlike the other 2 intervention programs, this intervention program in high school is more high stakes because they have to pass Algebra 1 and English 2 to graduate. So really not just filling those learning gaps, but also building in those other strategies and grade level materials so that they're successful and they can pass the ELC the first time, hopefully, but if not the first time, that kids who didn't pass, they also are in an intervention class and they can pass it the second time, or at least get enough skills build up to pass it so they can graduate and won't be in their senior year worried or stressed. Is the goal. I know I said a lot. I went over a lot. It's been a lot. But are there any questions?
Madam Chair, I do have a question.
Go ahead.
I want to thank you so much, Ms. Thornton. You did a good job great job actually since you've been here. This PowerPoint was very good for me. I do have a couple questions, and I guess I could refer to Superintendent Jolly or you.
Mm-hmm.
How we do the no new, and we're doing that in the reading. Could that Superintendent Jolly go on a parent on weekend basis, or can we do something other than the 45 minutes during the school day? Or?
I mean, I think Shannon did address that. Is that one of the frustrations with the teachers is that they don't feel the parents are matching their efforts. So I think that is part of our journey for the second quarter, is to try to get the parents to match our journey. We weren't letting parents in the buildings because of COVID. getting them in the building so that they can understand the math too, because things are a little different now, and bring them in to help. But I think that's what we've identified as the issue. I appreciate Shannon doing these surveys, so we get the information we need to make informed decisions.
And that possibly could get our scholars a little bit more time for reading, like
Yeah, I
reading.
mean, you gotta have a parent commit to doing it at home. You know, and you know how a lot of parents, grandparents, and other people are picking up the kids and so forth. So just getting everybody on the same page is where I think one of our struggles is that we'll continue on.
And my other question to you, Superintendent Jolly, with the scope and sequence, and I know when you came in June of 2015, we had that. Is that working for us as a district?
Yeah, so we got two different pathways. We have our regular pathway, which is the scope and sequence, which is grade level appropriate, which kind of aligns our curriculum with the testing and making sure that we cover the curriculum. And then we have this whole other, I don't want to say curriculum, but intervention based on each child.
Okay.
So we know where a child's supposed to be in second grade. So basically, it's like a doctor's service where you get diagnosed, those assessments you're taking. And then there's a prescription for each child.
I got you.
So each child is placed in a group based upon where they are, where they are. So if I'm on a, say, A level, and just say you on the C level, or I'm on the C level, you're on the A level, we're not going to hold you back to the C level because you already at A. So what we've done is at each assessment, and they talk about the frequency of assessing, because what Shannon described is that some people are accelerating. They just didn't learn the information because they already had the skill set. Then you have some kids who didn't have the skill set. Remember, you got kindergartners that's now in second grade. If their parent didn't take that time during the
Summer,
pandemic,
COVID.
those kids are going to be far behind. So one of the things that we wanted to do is ensure that every child was grouped based on their ability, and we really wanted to ensure that the higher achieving kids were not held back because we didn't provide them the instruction they need. So just as the lower skilled students needed assistance, we want to make sure the higher skilled students had the acceleration, which we did a test, and now we have our gifted program back at the elementary school. So we got a third grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade gifted program. We had gifted before, but during the COVID situation, we didn't have anybody test into it. So now they tested into it, not gifted back at the elementary school. So basically, every child in the elementary school has their own individualized reading plan. Every single one. I think this is very unique because people don't look at each child to the detail. Now, that middle and high school, those kids already had some skills already. You know, they already were pretty much in 4th or 5th grade already, so they knew how to read. So it wasn't the need to be as intensive. It's not as high. But we are identifying more students who need the help, so we have to make the adjustments to make sure they get the help. But basically, what we've done is look at every student in our district, figure out where they are, and then provide them support. Just like you go to the doctor's office, you diagnose what your issue is, and now here's the prescription. And as you get better, you move to another group. If you get worse, you stay in that group, or you might go to another group. And those with those extra teachers have allowed us to do at the elementary school. To have these, like you said, 100-some groups a day.
Yeah, it's about 140.
140 groups a day. So that's a whole lot of movement, a whole lot of children going different ways. One of the challenges with it, though, it took us a little longer because the teacher absence. And sometimes we have to use the intervention teachers to cover class. Because with COVID back in the day, we could split a class 4 different ways, but we're trying not to do that. Well, we don't do it because we don't want, the tracking and the infections and all those things. So that's limited. But now we're full go. And I will commend our teachers because it's been a struggle for them because it's a change of thought. It's a change of, people are used to going back to what they do. Now we're asking them to do what you do normally, but now we need to do something additional. We need you to take this group and then you tier your instruction for your group that you have. But you also got your regular class too. And pushing and screaming, they're doing it. I mean, I think they're doing it. And it's a lot of meetings. Shannon is in meetings. Shannon has learned patience because, she's going to get attacked. She's mad because we're pressing and pushing. Because, again, we start talking about this in the pandemic, that we knew the kids was going to be behind. We brought them back early. We started doing all these things in place, put things in place, and the data will show at the end of the day that we're far ahead of any other district because we made the attention to detail to ensure that every kid has what they need to be successful.
Thank you, Superintendent Jolly. Great explanation. Thank you, Ms. Thorne. Appreciate
No
it.
problem.
I had 3 questions. I'll just taper down to 2. One of them is projected academic increase. I know you've got your plans in place. So when are you looking at, like, how much are you expecting and by when?
So that's a great question. So in January and December, they take their universal screeners. The universal screeners predict based on the student's ability and norm reference data where that student is going to be. So by the midpoint in December and January, we hope that the student is halfway there. So that will be our overarching checkpoint to see where students are. So the goal is that students are meet the halfway mark with their universal screening data.
Okay, thank you. My second one is kind of going to play on that. I like the fact that you're looking at building a dashboard, scoreboard to have the kids see how well they're all doing. How are we going to celebrate the successes, be they large or small?
Yeah. So a lot of things I've had in my head, I haven't even had a chance to share with Mr. Jolly because we've just been so busy with the logistics of everything. Like he mentioned, putting 140 groups together and managing where they are. Small things, celebrations when students meet targets and goals, especially with progress monitoring. So simple things like certificates can help. Letters home celebrating, like we send the information and communicate that. Letters home to parents, notifying their parents that your child is growing. Also, bigger incentives. I thought about things like we mentioned, the after school or Saturday thing, making it so it's an incentive at the end for students to press their parents to come. So if there's 4 sessions at the end of the 4, you come to all 4, then you get to go like to Sky Zone or somewhere fun, but really trying to incentivize it and get kids excited about it. Because right now teachers are saying they just think of it as another test, and teachers think of it as another test. And they're saying we don't want to test the kids to death. But I'm trying to push that if we don't test the kids, we don't know if they're growing. So like Mr. Jolly said, it's this back and forth we're playing. But I do see that we're turning a corner in the way teachers and scholars. Well, I think teachers are starting to turn their minds around. And I'm hoping second semester it trickles down to the way students see instruction and learning.
Thank you, ma'am.
No problem.
Go ahead.
And it may not even be a question, but a red flag popped in when I looked at 15% for the middle school. And I'm concerned about that because I just feel that if you say 80% of the students in middle school had an intervention plan, I would say, okay, I feel very comfortable what you have done for the elementary. But we know that when you get to 5th, 6th, and 7th grade, we got to prepare them for high school. And if we don't target them, and I'm going to target it, to make sure that they are in as many groups. Now, you said 140 groups. How many of those 140 groups are in that middle school?
Go ahead.
Yeah, so the middle school has, so it's a different setup in the middle school. The middle school, we have intervention teachers. So with students, they don't, like, they taken out of the elective and put into that. The whole schedule for middle school, high school is altogether different than elementary. So with the middle school, and I'm going to tell you, it's a difference in, Shannon alluded to how people teach. The middle school and high school teach totally different. In middle school, high school teachers are like masters of subject. Where in elementary school, they teach everything. So if you're a second grade teacher, you teach every subject. So you have a wider knowledge base of how to instruct students in different subjects. Where a high school teacher or middle school teacher, they're math teachers or they're science teachers or they're social studies teachers. They can't teach reading because they weren't trained to teach reading. So the whole concept of how to do intervention in the middle school, it has to be different because in elementary school, they're generalists. They know all the subjects, want you to teach, read, math, everything. And sometimes we team them together. So what we have to do at the middle school is, as Shannon talked about, is change professionally develop the teachers so that they are able to differentiate in their class. So our ELA teachers now should be able to take different groups of students and do it the way that we do it at elementary school. But historically, they haven't been trained that way. They've been trained to teach ELA, and they teach it the way we probably learned it, or the way it was taught 20 years ago, where elementary teachers already had that skill already. So I think our process this year is the interventions, the kids, the most targeted kids are going to the intervention, but also expanded it so it's part of the regular instruction in ELA math. They're going to need it in science too.
Right.
They need it in everything.
And we're exploring different ways to use those programs too, because as teachers are building that toolbox, extending Alex into every single math class. So that way, while the teacher is building that toolbox for standards that are being taught on grade level, students have access to below grade level skills that they can build up through Alex, and Alex will automatically give them more and more and more and keep them progressing. And teachers can track that data without really doing anything. So putting that program out there for all the math classrooms also is something that we're considering for the middle school.
But it's a mindset change in middle and high school. They look at themselves as like independent contractors who teach one thing. And what we ask them to do now is teach you one thing, but now you got to differentiate it. You got a high group, middle group, and low group. Now, how do you do that in your class? How do you rotate your students in your class? So that's the next challenge, to get to that 80 or 90% at the middle school. Where at the elementary school, we just take a block, everybody can teach reading because everybody teaches reading already. Where we don't have as many people with that expertise at the middle high school.
So I can feel comfortable that there will be no child left behind at the middle school.
That is my goal. That is my goal. I want to leave this year with saying every single child receives intervention in either English or reading, and then hopefully next year both. But like Jolly said, it is a mind shift change, but we at least can have those plans in progress where we can say that 100% of our kids received intervention or enrichment this school year.
Thank you.
Did you have any questions for me?
No, Barbara touched on the exact same one I was going to touch on. The 15%.
Thank you so very, very much. That was a really good presentation. Very clear.
I'll let her finish. I'm sorry.
Very clear and very in depth.
I appreciate it. Thank you all so much for your support.
Absolutely.
And welcome to our district. Thank
I
you.
can actually ask this to both Ms. Thornton and Mr. Jolly. So when do you expect that we'll get the next update? I imagine you guys are, this is the first one, and then March, April.
So we'll have updates on universal screening data at the end of January and progress monitoring data in February and March, because for it to really assess if students are growing, you need a certain number of probes, what they call it. So to get those probes, we do it every other week. So it's at least 6 weeks for us to see a true picture of if these interventions are working. But once we get it rolling, hopefully every 2 weeks, we'll have a new set of data to see if students are progressing.
Okay. So when you guys come back to the board, would it pretty much be the same format, but we can see comparative data to see that when she first presented, this 15% is now at 65% for the middle school, or something to kind of show
the increase
progress.
Yep. So the increase, and then also the actual data that shows if these interventions are working and what that exact success rate is.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Really
Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you.
Awesome. I'm next.
You are.
Mine will be real quick. On the first slide. So I just wanted to talk about this MOU that we are asking the board to consider tonight with the city of Warrensville. And basically this MOU, which will allow us to discuss transferring 10 acres of land located in Eastwood for land located behind the YMCA. Just gave you, I know you read it, I just wanted to just give you a brief overview of it. The district goes to build a 2,000 square foot facility for kindergarten and pre-kindergarten site near our other schools to create a campus. The city may redevelop Eastwood for housing. Next one, Jonathan. Well, sure. So just the agreements, just this MOU was at a real high level. The district will proceed with demolishing Eastwood, so that's part of the plan. It should be demolished by January 31st, I believe. So that
It's
January 31st when they will bring the wrecking ball there. They'll start abating on December 16th. The district will hire a firm to develop the size and scope of the school project. So that's like hiring an architect to design the building. The district and the city will work together to determine the appropriate size and location of the portion of the city property used for the school project, which we anticipate, and this is without an architect, to be about 5 acres we would need to build something new. And then the rest of it is that, in order for anything to happen, resolutions will have to be approved by both governing parties, that's the board and city council. This is key because Ms. Mitchell shared in a question about the both parties understand the exchange of the real property must be mutually beneficial to both parties. So the value has to be of some mutually beneficial. Now it might not be exact dollar for dollar or parcel for parcel, but in real estate, different things meet or cost more. I mean, so anything on Northfield is going to be more valuable than what Eastwood is because of the location. And then just the cooperation that documents and everything will be shared mutually. So all this basically what this does allows us the opportunity to engage the city and say, hey, this is where we want, and to possibly hire an architect to design something that we can take to them and say, we will need this piece of land. Of course, we'll be looking at other options than this to build. We'll be looking at any other option because if there's another option where we don't have to build, I think we will probably execute that way. We will look at that too. So we want to look at everything, but we want to start these conversations with the city because we have a population issue at the elementary school. The district is at 1805. We were supposed to be at 1829 in 2026, so we already are there, and we've taken spaces that are supposed to be community spaces out the building to become classrooms. So as we have about 175 kindergartners, and they keep coming, we have to make some decisions to figure out where we're going to house this swell of young people. Next, and I just want to go over some important dates. We do have a calendar. We shared it with the board. But you can go anytime and see what's going on. I'll reshare it. So we have everybody pouring into this calendar to, so you can see what's going on every day at every school. But some important things, the district is sponsoring a blessing basket pickup. Alumni did donate 100 turkeys. We will have that on the next agenda to go with our blessing baskets that we're passing out. The HBC fair is on Saturday at the high school. There's a COVID protocol in place. They have it all set up. You have to have a vaccination card or a test within 72 hours. And we're also going to have testing there. So there'll be tests there too. Also at the middle school, John Dewey, the Hunger Network is doing a food distribution too. So we'll have food distribution on Friday and Saturday. The Hunger Network, which called us, they just wanted a place to pass out their turkeys, so they'll be doing them at times. Dewey, I did see the information. Our girls team opens up at Reynoldsburg on Saturday also. On 12:30, they play Bishop Hartley, one of the best teams, best ball teams. We anticipate our team will be great this year, girls also. Next week is Wellness Week. I appreciate the board supporting. Students will be in remote learning Monday and Tuesday. They'll get their assignments Monday and Tuesday. On Monday, our teachers will have a wellness day where we'll give out booster shots. We'll have line dance. We'll do all this is for our teachers to online. The pressure is on them. They have responded well, but I understand the stress, and I know you as a board understand the stress that they've been under. The health issue, kids are behind, and then we're pressing them to do new things. So I think the union and everyone else were very appreciative of these 2 days that we provided them. The boys' first home game is on December 3rd. Just want to get that on everybody's calendar. Our first year without Mr. Swift as the coach, so this will be monumental event as the new coach. And then we have our STEAM fair, and I'll be able to provide more information about that, but that's December 9th. So I want to get this on everybody's agenda. I want to share back out the calendar. Everybody puts everything on the calendar, every school, and it's updated. It's a live calendar. So at this time, any questions about anything?
No, sir.
All right. Next up, I'm sorry.
No, go right ahead. It's Dr. Rock. You got it. Go ahead, Dr. Rock.
Okay. Go to the next slide. Every November and May, we have a 5-year forecast, so we have the November forecast. It's due every November and May, and it provides 3 years of historical financial information and 5 years of total projections, starting with the current year and projecting into 2026. The real estate tax revenue and state funding accounts for 86% of our total revenue. And there's a decrease in state funding. This is due to the new formula. But the decrease, even though we're getting a decrease in revenue, we're getting a substantial decrease in expenditures. So net effect on the 5-year forecast is
Net positive.
positive. New formula funds actual students that are enrolled, and the new formula eliminates the deductions for community charter schools, ed choice, open enrollment. That's like, in the past, that's been upwards of over $5 million. So on the old funding formula, we may get $11 million. They take off 5 and we end up with 6. Now we just get 6. We get what our students that are actually attending. That's the beauty of the new funding formula. Real estate values are stable. In 2018 was the last time we had a revaluation, and it was a 13% increase. And in 2021, we're projecting a 6% growth, just to be conservative, but it's still after review, so everything is stable. Other revenue includes tax abatement revenue and interest revenue. Those are the 2 biggest line items in that line. Overall, it's a stable revenue stream, which is surprising, because there was a substantial decrease in interest revenue since the interest rates have dipped down to practically 0. But what counterbalanced with that was we had growth in the Amazon revenue sharing, because that's starting to normalize now, because we're going into multiple years. Before it was brand new. Now it's collecting full. And then also we had some upticks in our abatement revenue. So that counterbalanced it. So now when you look at other revenue, it's pretty stable, $5 million straight across. Expenditures. Overall, there's a decrease in total expenditures, and that's due to 2 points. The first point is that you'll notice in payroll, there's a substantial decrease in payroll. That's because we're moving those costs over and utilizing ESSER funds to pay for the learning gap programs and cleaning and sanitization due to the pandemic. So the payroll trend will return in 2025 as the ESSER funding ends. So when you look at that line item, you can see that it shoots up to almost $19 million, but during the other time we have it at a lower amount, between 15 and 16 million. And then the other part of the total expenditures decreasing is the purchase services. Due to the new state funding formula, there's elimination of deductions for purchase services such as open enrollment, community school, charter schools, and ed choice. That alone is a $3 to $4 million drop. So expenditures have gone down. The next slide, please. So the major expenditures continue to be personnel services, retirement, and purchase services that account for 91% of our total expenditures. And personal services and benefits, that's pretty much our payroll, accounts for 69% of expenditures. And this is a healthy indicator for the school district, since many school districts approach 85 to 90% of their budget just covering payroll. So we're doing good when we have almost over 31% to spend on other things other than just our payroll and services. Next slide.
Purchase services accounts for 22% of total expenditures of the district. Community schools, open enrollment, tuition, scholarships out, again, are no longer charged to the district. So that's why you see such a decrease. And I just said that decreased over $3 million compared to the prior year. Next slide. The next point that I always like to put on every one of my budget forecasts is that our 2017 certificates of participation require in the loan covenants that we have an annual appropriation. What I like to always tell all of our Moody's ratings and everybody that requires this, that's why at Warrensville, we appropriate it over 5 years. Whether you like it or not, we go out 5 years. So all 5 years of the principal and interest on that payment is scheduled into the 5-year forecast and is projected. And it hovers around $950,000 a year. Next slide, please. And then also on our 5-year forecast, we put in here, and this was the board's actions, which is a very good proactive financial planning for the district. So this is one of the items that I'm most proud of for our board to be able to do this kind of board policy, deficit spending. We look at the deficit spending as a district on line 6.010. And what that is the line that looks at what current revenue came into the district, what was spent, what was left over. If there's something left over, that means that we spent within current revenue. And if we spent within current revenue and resources, then that amount that's remaining gets added to the prior year and you accumulate a carryover balance, which is very favorable for the district. Because that carryover balance could go away very, very fast. So the deficit spending on line 6.010 is projected in fiscal year 2025 and 26. And that doesn't require anything further for us. And the policy, the requirements are is if it's in year 3 or year 2. So this is in year 4 and 5, so we're within the policy that we don't have to address anything. Although I will say Mr. Jolly and I are constantly, strategically planning to make sure that we're always within, operating within current resources. And happy to report that fiscal year, this year that we just ended, June of 2021, was the 12th year that the district spent within current resources. So that's how we evaluate that carryover balance. The forecast overall is funded for all 5 years, which is very favorable for us. If you go to other districts, once you start getting negative years, that means that you either have to go for a new levy or you have to have a mix of both. We're very fortunate that we don't have that, so we're funded for 5 years. The ending fund balance carryover continues to grow when the district spends within current resources and the utilization of the ESSER funds. Now, again, we're utilizing that by moving expenditures over to the ESSER funds so we can accumulate a carryover balance that can have enormous impact on various programs for the district, which includes the master facilities plan, if there's any unanticipated construction costs, additional program costs, and future initiatives by the district, and also improving and bolstering our credit worthiness in the district if we needed to go out and finance anything else. And then the last slide is the famous blue book. We get a little shout out on it because I'm on the front page as an author, and then on the second page is a shout out that says, I'm the treasurer of Warrensville Heights. So it's good advertisement for us. This is the 25th edition, and this book's been in publication for 50 years. So I'm glad that I'm part of it. So it's out. I can get copies for the board if you think so. We've done it in the past. Is it okay to get copies?
Yeah, sure, please.
I would love one.
Good. And that's it. That concludes my section.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rock. With that, thank you to both gentlemen for your updates, your reports. With that, we're going to move into our agenda. If I can have a motion on the floor to approve by consent agenda, items 2.1 for the treasurer's report, and items 2.1 and 2.2 for the treasurer's report and financial recommendations.
Madam Chair, I move item number 2 on tonight's agenda, consent treasury report and financial recommendations, looking at items 2.1 and 2.2.
Thank you. May I have a second?
I second.
Thank you, ma'am. It's been moved and properly seconded. Board, before we move forward with the vote, do you have any questions or comments on this section?
Madam Chair, I just have one question for our CFO. Dr. Rock, on the 5-year forecast, that's taken in effect our previous bond, correct?
No, the 5-year forecast only reports on the general fund.
Mhm.
So the bonds are in the bond fund.
Right.
But we have about 3 more years to go on the old fund, and the finance model is working just
Okay.
as we planned for it to work.
So we're still paying it off sooner than we anticipated.
We're just paying it off as we can.
Oh, okay.
But we're making smaller payments on the old bonds in order to control the millage.
I got you. Thank you so
We'll
much.
give you an update on that next,
That's all right. That's good. Thank you. That's it, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Anything else, board? All right, Dr. Rock, can you please call the roll?
Mr. Freeman,
Yes.
Mrs. Gator,
Yes.
Mrs. Newman,
Yes.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Ms. Mitchell.
Yes, motion passes 5-0. If we can move along on our agenda to section 3, I need a motion on the floor to approve by consent agenda superintendent's recommendations and presentation for board action certificated staff items 3.1 through items 3.6.
Madam Chair, I move that we accept as a consent agenda the superintendent's recommendations and presentations for board action certified staff, 3.1 through 3.6.
May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Board, is there any discussion on any topic in this section, or before we move forward, Mr. Dolly, is there anything else you want to share with us?
No, these are basically some standard things that we do. It is a replacement for our social worker. That individual has worked with us through Beach Brook over the years, so she's already familiar with the culture supplementals. The one 3.4 is amendment. I did tonight provide the board with the new contract book. And there was one that was submitted before was just out of the old contract.
All right, if there's any additional discussion?
Mr. Johnson,
Yes, ma'am.
on 3.6, the long-term sub, are they certified teachers or are they?
No, they're not. They're open positions where we couldn't hire and couldn't find anybody. We see to keep our postings open. There's nobody right now. So no, they're getting support by the curriculum team though. Tremendous support by Dr. Campbell's team to ensure they have the tools and things they need to be successful.
Okay.
We're having a hiring fair next week on the 30th. I forgot to announce that. We don't have it here in this room actually.
Oh, okay.
To try to bring people in.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Anything else, board? Dr. Rock, can you please call the roll?
Mrs. Gator,
Yes.
Mrs. Newman,
Yes.
Mr. Freeman,
Yes.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Ms. Mitchell.
Yes, motion passes 5-0. Next on our agenda is section 4. If I can have a motion on the floor to approve by consent agenda superintendent's recommendation and presentation for board action classified staff, and that's going to be items 4.1, 4.2, and 4.3.
Madam Chair, I move item number 4 on tonight's agenda, the superintendent's recommendation and presentation of board action classified staff. I'm looking for items 4.1 through 4.3.
Thank you. May I have a second?
A second.
Thank you. It's been moved and properly seconded. Again, in this section, board, is there any questions, comments? All right, hearing none. Dr. Rock, can you please call the roll?
Mrs. Newman,
Yes.
Mr. Freeman,
Yes.
Mrs. Gator,
Yes.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Ms. Mitchell.
Yes, motion passes here 5-0. Next on our agenda, we need a motion on the floor to approve by consent agenda superintendent's recommendations and presentation for personnel and programs. And here we've got items 5.1 through 5.8.
Madam Chair, I move that we accept as a consent agenda. I'm sorry, let me go back. Superintendent's recommendations and presentations for personnel and programs for items 5.1 through 5.8.
Thank you. May I have a second?
I second it.
Thank you, ma'am. It's been moved and seconded. And board, in this section, is there any additional discussion or questions before we go to vote?
None for me, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you. Dr. Rock, can you please call the roll?
Mr. Freeman,
Yes.
Mrs. Gator,
Yes.
Mrs. Newman,
Yes.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Ms. Mitchell.
Yes, motion passes 5-0. All right, we're going to move right along in our agenda. We're at new business, section 7.1 OSBA updates, and this is for our capital conference. We had 3 school board members attend this year, and that would be members Freeman, Gator, and Roberts. And so we're just going to go in alphabetical order. We want to remind everybody that we will try to maintain a 3-minute overview so that we can keep the meeting moving, and kick it off with yourself, Mr. Freeman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This year's Capitol Conference, with what's going on with the National School Board and Ohio School Board Association, a lot of members, we're going down, and we had some new board members that just won their election in November, so this was a good time for them to actually go in it. I attended about 5 actual sessions. The best section that I attended, and it hit home, was the growing achievement through board leadership. So with this, they wanted to show that actual scholar, other than achievement and grades, which we look at from the state level, but are we building a whole child? Are we building that child with communication skills, with actual job skills, with social skills? I mean, a lot of districts want their child to, be, oh, you're getting an A, you're getting a B. But this dug a little deeper. As a board, we should be looking to try to get our scholars to be all around student. And like Superintendent Jolly told us 3 years ago, it's the actual whole scholar, the whole child. And I thought she dug deep on it. It hit some points, especially in urban districts, that they're talking about this because, I mean, we are having a gap now that we had COVID, so we know our scholars are behind. But I thought growing that achievement, it means more. And I know I talked to President Mitchell about it when we were talking, Tracy, but this is the one I told you that it's actually saying, hey, what are you doing to get that scholar prepared? I mean, it's good to walk across stage. You got the degree, you turn the tassel, that's fine. But are we doing things as a board to make that scholar a better human being in America? So I thought it was a good conference. We still need to address, and I'll have a CUBE meeting tomorrow at 2, but we need to address what can urban districts in Ohio do to get the actual board development that we need for our scholars, not just for going to a Capitol Conference, and it's fine. And I think Mr. Roberts can talk to it, but we need to do more on a governance level, and I'll get that information. So, but it was good. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. Member Gator, would you like to go next, ma'am?
I sure will, since G comes after F. So I had a couple of meetings that I had to attend as a result of, because of Capitol Conference. So I had to attend the OSBA Ambassador meeting. They started it in 2020, and of course COVID hit, so we weren't able to proceed with it. But basically it is, they've selected various individuals to go around their community and just kind of advocate for public education, which technically we're all ambassadors for public education. The other one that I attended was the Delegate Assembly meeting, which is, it was interesting this year. It was a 3-hour-long meeting. Some of the discussions around transgender students, non-binary, referring to them as he, she, them, or they, it got pretty heated. So yeah, it was interesting though. And that's where OSBA decides what their legislative platform it is for the upcoming year. The session that I really enjoyed was one that dealt with mental health and wellness plan, very similar to what we're already doing with our staff here in a week or so. But the school district was Napoleon Area Schools, which I think is somewhere out of Toledo. What they're doing though is their wellness plan includes planned activities during the school day for students. So there was professional development involved for the staff. The staff came up with all these planned activities for 2 days worth of professional development. They started off with by establishing a committee, and then the committee came up with a budget and programming. They did a survey to discuss with the students what causes stress and anxiety, things like academic success, self-image, fighting, being bullied. And then they came up with a professional development plan for the teachers, because the teachers were involved in this 2-day event for the students. And then the students, the 2 days worth of mental health, their mental health days included an education and awareness session where they received information about mental health. They had a guest speaker come in. They had videos that they watched. And then there was a focus for this district on substance abuse and treatment, because it's the Toledo area, and that's what's impacting their community. And then the other day was a self-care day that was geared with yoga, puzzles, painting, coloring. You would think that all of that sounds kind of corny, but they said it really helped the students. The thing that I really liked is, and then I'll be finished with it, there was a session where it was called I Wish My Teacher Knew. And have you guys heard of that before, where they write down something about they wish that their teacher knew that I'm suffering from depression, or that I saw my dad get killed last year. So it just brings to the teachers a higher awareness of what's really going on in the schools. And then I'll just conclude. Like I said, I was really impressed with the enthusiasm of the presenters and what their program seemed to bring for them. I think that teaching those risk factors and showing the warning signs for the variety of mental health issues is important. And as educators, we're often the first line of defense for these students. So my plea to you, Mr. Jolly, is as we're improving our wellness plan, maybe we can consider something like that, where we're actually engaging the students and allowing them to see the warning signs and know what their mental health means. I think there's more students that are suffering with it than we. And that's what I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
You ready?
Yes, I was checking the time to see.
I got it.
3 minutes.
Yeah, I got it.
During the conference, I attended numerous learning sessions, which included social justice and equity in action, making your board policies work for you, from recovery to continuous improvement, growing achievement through board leadership, and engage to empower family and community. My major takeaway would have to have been the role that family and community engagement play in the education of our scholars, especially when considering the challenges presented by the pandemic. And coincidentally, I heard some of those issues reflected in the presentation that Ms. Thornton offered us earlier. So those two kind of went hand in hand, and they spoke upon the need for the family and the community to be involved in the education that just as Ms. Thornton spoke on in her presentation. I also found myself very enthralled by the conversation regarding the steps that are necessary to establish true equity within our educational system. They were talking about the true commitment that all the stakeholders would have to make, like such as the district, the local boards, the national board, the legislators, how everybody would need to work, in concert to ensure that there was true equity across the board. And finally, I'd just like to speak on how I felt it was very beneficial to have our superintendent and our treasurer right there on site, because we were able to have real-time conversations about some of the things that took place in the sessions almost immediately following those sessions. It seems like we would have the sessions, we would all come together and be able to exchange and share ideas about things while they were still fresh in our minds. And I think that was beneficial, that we could share that information in basically a real-time setting.
Thank you. You did good. So I'll have to say I am sorry I didn't get to go this year to Capitol Conference. I do understand the elephant in the room was that nobody talked about what's going on at the national level. So I do hope sincerely that OSBA and the other state associations are able to come together and talk to NSBA and come to some conclusion about what they're going to do, because to your point, Mr. Freeman, unfortunately, our state association does not address the needs enough for our urban school districts and school boards as well. So looking forward to more to come on that. And thank you all for attending and representing us, and for Mr. Jolly and Dr. Rock for you and your teams going. Looking forward to next year. All righty. So next on our agenda, we are going to move into executive session. And as we noted earlier, we're going in for 2 reasons. So if I can have a motion on the floor for item 9.1 so that we can move